Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with another 1/35 scale workable track link tutorial and review video. But for this time, it's going to be a little bit different because the track links in question are kit supplied, and the kit in question is one that you see here on the table, which is the 1/35 scale Amusing Hobby Löwe German Heavy Tank Vehicle Kit. The reason why I'm making this video here is a bit different compared to the other workable track link videos that I've done in the past. Generally, when I make a video like this here, that's because the kit in question needs a replacement set of tracks. Either if the kit supplies you with the dreaded individual link and length that I absolutely despise, or if the kit originally had single-piece vinyl tracks that just disintegrated or dry rotted into oblivion, and a new set is going to be required in order to repair or build the model. This one here, that's not the case. This one here, the tracks are actually supplied with the model in question. This was just like the 1/35 scale Hobby Boss T29 video that I did a little while ago, where I also did a accompanying video of me assembling the tracks. This one here is going to be in the exact same skies. As I mentioned before, this here is the 1/35 scale Amusing Hobby VK7201K Löwe, or specifically, I guess it would be appropriate to refer to as the term hinten version of this vehicle. This model here is the subject matter of its own model showcase video, which will be posted before this video makes its debut. In a nutshell, it's a fantastic kit, really fun to build, really interesting subject matter, and I definitely recommend checking that video out if you want to know more about the kit itself. As I mentioned in that other video, the kit does supply you with a set of workable track links, and the reason, I should say part of the reason why I'm making this video is that when I was doing some research on this kit online a little while ago, I saw a review of one and the individual complained about the tracks and he had trouble putting them together. In fact, I don't think he was able to do it at all. And this is something that I've seen referenced a few times here or there on the Amusing Hobbies kits, but specifically the Löwe. And the tracks on these vehicles are actually really nice, and they go together pretty well if you have the technique down. This is actually my second Löwe go-ahead. I've built the other version of this kit where it has the turret in a slightly different location. It's got a different hull, but the track and the running gear on the two kits are identical. So in this video here, I'm going to actually show you how the track goes together and how to mount it to the model, and do it in a way where you're not going to be able to pull any hairs out of your head. With the model off of the table, here you can see the kit supply components for the tracks. So we have these two bags right over here, as well as also this little piece of plastic, which is going to be very important for the construction. The kit itself utilizes the track, and the design of which is very similar to what we see on the King Tiger. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it actually is King Tiger track. Not really sure offhand, but don't grill me if that's not the case. Regardless, the kit supplies you with the various components. One runner over here consists of the track links themselves, and the other runner consists of the ice cleats. So, being a King Tiger pattern of track, or King Tiger-ish pattern of track, you have both a tooth and a toothless type link, and they need to alternate when you're assembling them. As for this track, or I should say this runner over here, this consists of all the ice cleats that are used to glue on top of the track over here, and then once glued in place, it'll complete the track link look, and it'll also give you the hinge required in order to get the thing in a workable state. Also supplied with the kit is a jig in order to help line up the track links, a number of them at a time, which will really assist with the fabrication of the tracks. As I mentioned before, this is not my first go-ahead of one of these, and this set here, or I should say this little gadget over here, was instrumental in helping me actually get the thing built. So this is definitely something you want to pay attention to on your Löwe kit, be it the term hinten or the term Vorn version. The other thing to mention is that just like with the Hobby Boss T29, these tracks are not sold separately by Amusing Hobby. It's not like something, as we saw with the Rye-Fueled models, where when they come up with a kit, they also have an option to sell the tracks as an aftermarket set. These ones here, that's not the case. If you do find a set of these tracks, chances are it's going to be something that you'll find online in a parted out format. But they do not sell them boxed and ready to go as a conversion or as an upgrade set like some of the other manufacturers on the market. I'm also not sure if these tracks are recycled on other Amusing Hobby kits. They do have some other really cool paper Panzer type vehicles out there, from the Bar to, well, I believe they have a few, to the Jagd, no, what is it? Yeah, the Jagd Panther 2. There's a few other really interesting kits that they have, but I'm unaware if they're actually recycling these tracks or if they tooled up their own tracks for those kits. Either way, if you have the Löwe, either version that I mentioned, this video is probably going to be very interesting to you. With the runners removed from the bag, you get to see the runners in better light. The runners are all made from injection molded polystyrene, and the color is this brown color that we see here. This is very similar to what we see on many other workable track links on the market, from Ryefield as well as also Trumpeter, and their subsequent sister companies like Hobby Boss, to name a few. The quality of the moldings are excellent. Amusing Hobby does make some very good quality kits, and you can see the quality on the moldings hopefully on camera right now. As I mentioned before, the Löwe tracks here are very akin to King Tiger track, and the moldings on them also look very exquisite. As I also mentioned before, we have a link and a linkless setup a track for the hinges, and this is as true to form, or I guess it would be if the vehicle actually came into fruition, but this is very similar again to what we see on King Tigers. Actually, no, it's identical to what we see on King Tigers. So that's what we have here. Let me go ahead and open up this baggie. And as I mentioned before, this one contains the ice cleats. Same exact type of plastic used on the two parts. Pieces are very clean. There's no flash or other things to mention. Everything is nice and finely molded. And here we have the tools of the trade. If you are a person who's into building plastic models, all of this equipment here should be readily available, if not already in your toolbox. And if it's not, yeah, you probably need to update your toolbox and level up. So starting from left to right takes us to a needle file. This is a broad needle file right here. Of course, these come in a set. The set is currently off the table, but this one is the one that's going to be relevant for this project. We have here a miniature box cutter, but a X-Acto knife is more than suffice. Pair of clean cut snips. This is going to be instrumental. It's probably arguably the most important tool of the entire production and assembly process for this set. Some sandpaper here, 320 grit. Some thick sludge cure super glue. And the next equipment is something that is optional. However, it's definitely one that is relevant to mention, and that is a bottle here of super solvent. This stuff here may be instrumental because this helps dissolve the super glue, and if you have a snafu on these tracks over here, you don't want to ruin them and break them further, and the super solvent here dislodges and it actually dissolves super glue, but it does not dissolve polystyrene plastic. So this stuff here is actually very instrumental, and it's also good to have for just your average builds. All of the equipment that you see here is purchased either at a local hardware store, be it the sandpaper as well as the box cutter. However, everything else can of course be found on Amazon, and the link is listed in the video description below. The one thing I do also want to mention is that a lot of people out there, when they're building their models, they tend to use plastic cement, and that is the de facto way on doing it. Me personally, I like to roll with super glue, and I will be mentioning that, or I should say the advantages of that in this video. But specifically for the track links, these workable track links, the super glue, in my opinion, is a far better adhesive to use compared to standard plastic cement, because plastic cement is more permanent, and super glue here, you do have the ability to slightly reverse that with the super solvent, of course, and also it tends to dry a lot faster compared to the other counterpart. And when you're doing track links, you're going to appreciate the faster set time of super glue compared to the other glues that also tend to be used de facto by most builders out there. Having said that, not only do I use it on track links, I use it for literally everything. I don't use plastic cement. I know it's going to rub some people the wrong way. I just roll with super glue, and that's how I build every build on this channel, from large to small. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and actually get to the construction. And here we have one complete track band and a segment of track band already assembled. You can see that the track is nice and flexible, and this will definitely contour perfectly when it comes time for installation onto the vehicle, which of course you'll see as the video goes on. With this segment all snailed up, I can go ahead and get the jig and the other segment on screen. At the time here, I just went ahead and added the joining piece to get the two segments together, and as soon as that CA sets, I'll go ahead and be able to start another segment. I could show you exactly how the construction goes. So after doing the links that I've done so far, I've seen that the tracks go together very easily, pretty quickly too, specifically in comparison to some other workable track links that are out there, but I'm here to go ahead and walk you through the remainder of the construction. So I'm going to go ahead here and start with a fresh runner. And for this one here, I'm just going to go ahead and snip off a row here of the ones with the teeth, and I already have a bunch without the teeth, but I'll snip off some more as well. So the clean cut snips here make fantastic work of this. You just basically go through and remove without any sort of issues. And just like with all workable track link sets, the most amount of work isn't the assembly, it's just the preparation. So removing the things off of the sprue, deburring them, things like that, that's where really more or less the bulk of the work comes from when you are working with a set of tracks like this. Just like with the other one, you want to remove the other portions of links, but when you do, you want to have a little bit of material up to the track link so that you don't over snip into the actual link itself and remove accidentally too much material. Again, as you can see, the clean cut snips make real short work of the removal procedure. Okay, with the segment of links removed, it's now time to just do the deburring. To do the deburring on the one with the link, I like to utilize a X-Acto knife over here, as well as also some sandpaper, but you could also use the flat needle file that I mentioned earlier. With the X-Acto, I like to cut the extra material off of this side over here. If I could get it to focus, you can see that on this link, there are two protrusions that hang out on either side, and because of this, the burr is actually in a gully, and you can't really get to this with a piece of sandpaper or the needle file, because even the smaller needle files tend to be a little bit too big. So for this one here, I could just go in here and with a sharp X-Acto, I could just simply carve away the remnant, just like that. For the one on the opposite side, I could either use the knife like this one here, or I could go ahead and just polish it down with some sandpaper. I really don't recommend using the knife for this one because of the cutout over here for the sprocket. This tends to leave for some thin material in this section over here, and it's potentially subject to damage from warpage when you're putting pressure on it in order to cut off the plastic. So for this one over here, you could just go ahead and just run up and down with some sandpaper, or the needle file will also do the same trick. Whichever will work for you. When that is all set, I like to take the link and put it into the jig. Now you could go ahead and deburr them all in one swoop, or you could just do like what I do where you deburr them as you go. So this one here, just going to go into the jig. The way this goes is you have this section here with the teeth, and this lines up perfectly into the jig in that format. For this one here, I'll go ahead and deburr another one. I'll use the knife again for the one here on the top in the gully. As you see, just cleans that guy right out. And as for this one here, I'll go ahead and use the clean cut snip to get rid of the bulk. And then I'll go and use the needle file this time to polish down the rest. There you go. As you can see, it doesn't take much work to go ahead and remove the necessary plastic. Once necessary plastic is removed, the piece is put into the jig. And then it's time to get the other links fitted as well. For these ones here, you could again use the needle file. Just go up and down on these sections over here where the burr remains. Or you could do the same thing with some sandpaper. Again, either way will get you to the exact same end result. When that's all set, it's now time to put the link into the jig. The way you put the flap one into the jig, i.e. the one without the teeth, is the waffle side is actually pointing up, and this is important because you can actually assemble this with the wrong side down. Be sure you know which way the orientation is. With the way this jig is designed, the waffle pattern is pointing upward. And as for the links, they go in one way, so it can't really mess up in that regard, but you can accidentally put them on upside down. So that is something to be paying attention to. Once you find the correct orientation, which is like this right here, the link should just snap right into place with the one right here, just like so. And when that happens, you put the other open hinge into the other section, and there you have it. Now you can just rinse, wash, repeat until this entire jig here is filled up with track links. And as what's typically the case, it's usually trickier to get on camera than it is to do it in the flesh. But here we can see the entire jig now is filled up and occupied with the track links. Now it's time to go ahead and put on the top portions of the hinges, which are going to give both the top level of detailing to the track, and it's also going to go ahead and lock in the track links and prevent them from working themselves loose. And this is important to point out because you can easily make a mistake on these tracks here where you put the wrong part on the wrong location. So with the camera zoomed out a little bit, I have here the sprue with the ice cleat sections on them. And you'll notice that there are two portions, 1 and 2, and this is very relevant because you can accidentally go through the motions and just put these pieces on willy-nilly, and the thread pattern is actually going to be wrong. It will still assemble just fine, but it's going to be something that's going to stick out. If you look at the differences between the two sections, there is a difference, and it's very small and minute. And that's on this corner that we have right here. Hopefully this gets on camera, but there's actually a small little notch found in this section right here. Really hard to get on camera, but this notch is relevant because it is a mirror image on the version on the other side. And why this is relevant is because with the way these pieces get installed on the track, the notches are actually facing each other, and this is something that, again, if you're going through the motions, you can have these pieces not have that proper orientation, and it's going to be a mistake on your build. Oddly enough, the best way to illustrate this is actually using the instructions themselves, as they tell you in very plain verbiage on exactly what I'm referring about. So right here, once this thing gets into focus, hopefully you get to see the notch right there, and there's another one there on the opposite side. So basically the two notches are facing each other on the link. And the link that these get applied to are the ones with the teeth, and that's also something you want to be aware of, because with the way the holes are lined up, you could accidentally have them in reverse. So again, no pressure, but you want to pay attention. So when it comes to removing the pieces, I'm just going to remove one from each, and this is the best way to prevent any sort of confusion, and this is where, again, the clean cut snips are going to be paramount. So for the portion here without the notch, I'm just going to go butt up against the piece and make an incision. And then for the one with the notch, I'm going to go up to the point where it butts up against the one portion where the notch is and make the incision as well. Now that the piece has been removed off of the sprue, hopefully you will be able to see the notch in better light, or at least as soon as this camera gets into focus. Right there. Hopefully this comes out on camera. It's hard to see on my viewfinder at this time. So I cut off one over there, and now I'm going to remove another one from here. Okay, so now with those removed, I'm going to readjust the camera because I need to get into here and also get this on camera at the same time. So let me go ahead and take care of that. So this should be a workable camera angle. Here you can see the piece now ready for installation. Note I have the one here with the notch in this direction, and that's going to be the first one that I place over here. The one thing to mention is that there are two corresponding holes. Ooh, that's another thing to watch out. You got to be careful. You could bump this stuff on the jig and misalign things. But back to what I was saying before, there are two corresponding holes on the link and also on the piece themselves. And with the way the kit is designed, it's actually designed in a way where you cannot install this backwards. So that's a positive. One of the pins is closer to the end portion here of the cleat, as opposed to this one here where it's more or less 3/4 of the way in. On the link itself, maybe I could use this one here as an example. You can see that one of the corresponding holes is right here, while the other one is further in. So this is something that you want to pay attention to. So to glue this in place, this is where these tracks, you need to pay the utmost attention. You only want to add a finite amount of glue on each of the peg sections, and the peg sections exclusively. Otherwise, if there's too much glue, or if there's glue added in the other locations, it's going to seize up and your track is no longer going to be workable. And it kind of negates the whole point of going through this whole thing. So here I'm going to take my CA with this really busted up, ghetto looking nozzle on this section here, but I should have enough control here to take care of this. Obviously, if you have a newer bottle, it should be fine. This bottle's coming to the end of its service life, so it's going to be really good when I can finally retire it. So I'm just going to add a small little drop of glue right there. See, that's it. Very finite amount. I would wager it's a little too much, so I'm just going to move some with my finger, and there we have it. So very small amount of glue. Same thing to the opposite side. There we go. Excellent. So now I'm going to go ahead, get the notch lined up appropriately, and I'm just going to place it where it needs to be. And everything should just line up correctly. And once in place, just press it in. Not too much, but just enough to where it seats. And that is it. Just pull back and let it dry. At this point here, I'll grab the other one. Note the notch is in the reverse direction here. Or at least it should be if it gets into focus. There you go. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing. Just a finite amount of glue. This, by the way, is why I recommend super glue for this and not standard cement, because if you have something where the thing gums up the works, with the solvent over here, you could go ahead and dissolve that and basically rinse it off and repeat it, as opposed to cement where once the plastic bonds together, you're pretty much welded at that point. It's also why I like this slow cure stuff for this procedure here, because it gives you wiggle room and you're not on the clock, so to speak. Okay, hopefully it's not just a knuckle fest, but this one's all set, and I'm just going to drop him where he needs to go. And you don't want to have a Woody Allen cocaine incident here where you sneeze. Okay, and that's it. So now that the piece is installed, hopefully you can see the notches, how they're both pointing into each other. And why this is relevant is not just the notches, but also with the ice cleats. If you have the same unit, just repetitive, the ice cleat direction is going to be in a wrong pattern, and it's something that can definitely just throw off the look of your model, and it'll just piss you off. So you definitely don't want to do that. And then once that's set, you just move on to the next one until finally you have an entire row completed. When you put the last piece in place, this is the time when you need to do the most important thing for this entire track set, and that is to simply
just walk away.
That's right, just walk away. Let the glue set. I cannot stress that enough. If the glues do not set and you just continue with the motion, what can happen is that the pieces could pop off, or even worse, the piece will lift off slightly, the link will become misaligned, and then it's going to re-harden, and the link is just going to be wobbling around loose, and it's not going to seat properly. That is something that you definitely don't want to have happen. To avoid that, just set it and forget it. Like the old Showtime rotisserie grill. I'm kind of dating myself here. And it's dinner time, getting hungry. But the other thing to mention, though, is that when the glues are setting, once they are fully set, then you could continue further. Like I mentioned before, I'm using the Slow Cure Thick CA. This stuff tends to dry in about 5 or so minutes. So I set the tracks like this, walk away, do something else, then come back, and I could continue with the next leg of the assembly, which will be pinning to the main section of track over here, and then starting another run on the template, or I should say on the jig that we have presently. After a few minutes or so, it does go together pretty evenly and easily. The other thing I want to mention is that on this particular kit here, and I'm not sure if I ran into this on the other version of the Löwe, but some of the open, or I should say the links with the teeth on them, they have a little bit of flash on the hinge sections, and if that happens, like as you can see, I have some off pieces over here, you're not going to be able to get the piece to fit fully, and if you try to force it, you're just going to break it, so definitely you don't want to do that. Hopefully I'll encounter another one of these links, and I'll show you the best way to work around it. After the glues are finally set, you could come back, and the first thing you want to do is to go ahead and articulate the track. Even though there's only a finite amount of glue that was used, a lot of times the glue will ooze out slightly into some portions of the hinge. Fortunately, if you play your cards right, it's so little amount of glue that's easily overcome by just articulating the track. And then once the glue pops, just like so, the hinge is now fully articulated. Once this is done, the track is assembled and it's ready for the next step. So while I'm going on with this one here, I ran into one of those problem track links that I mentioned before where the piece just won't fit. So here's the track link in question. If I grab one of the other sides and try to hinge it, you will see that it'll go into the one side. However, when you reach to the top portion over here, it just is not going to fit. There's a physical obstruction in the way. And if you look very closely, you'll see that on the hinge section itself, there's just a little bit of flash. Very so subtle. So subtle enough that's actually really tricky to see, but it's enough where it's going to cause a blockage and prevent the link to fit into place. And this was true for both sides of this one link. As for where it is on the tree, I believe it's somewhere on the bottom portion over here from what I found, but either way, it's something that if you come across, you can actually restore it and get it back to full functional order. You're going to cut a little piece off like this and you're going to bend it. And then with this over here, you're just going to go into the sections where the flash is, and you're just going to basically just clean it up ever so slightly. Fortunately, there's only, I believe, one or so of these problem links on the runner, or on each of these track runners, or at least that's from the example that I have here. However, I don't think I ran into this issue on the other Löwe that I built a little while ago. But that one was the turm foreign version of the vehicle. This is the turm hinten one. This one may be a little bit cruder. I just don't know, but that is something that I do want to bring up. And you're just basically going to work on that link a little bit until finally the piece will be able to drop in place. After enough material is removed, the link will be able to slide directly in place. Now, in addition to using the sandpaper, which did help immensely, I also went ahead and utilized the flat needle file. Although you have to be careful because with the thinnnesses of some of the parts over here, namely some of these hinge sections, they could crack off. So you want to remove the material first with the sandpaper, which will open up the tolerance for them to slide the needle file in place. As for which portion of the needle file to use, on this one here, one side is serrated and one side isn't, and I actually use the unserrated side in order to just polish down the side sections because the depth is perfectly fine. So you don't want to remove any material from this side, just the top and bottom portions, which again, if you use the flat side over here, you'll be able to do that and not cause any sort of over sandage. Is that a real word? Who knows, but I'm just going to roll with it. So here it goes. I'm going to use this piece right here. I'm just going to go ahead and go up and down these sections very lightly until the tolerances are open up to the point where I can go ahead and install the link on the other side. Okay, so here goes the piece I was talking about before. This one, I'm just going to hit it with the sandpaper first. You don't have to do this for long. Only a few passes really is all that's required. And fortunately, it's only on one of the links per runner, so that's good. There we go. Just a little bit. When you think you've removed enough material, just go ahead, grab the piece, and try to drop it into place. Don't want to force it, you just want to make sure that the thing lines up. And when it does, you'll be good to go. So this one here, I'm going to go ahead and throw onto the jig, and I'm going to continue the construction until I have a complete set. I just got back from assembling the last section of track. Here's the jig, it's not necessary anymore. And at this point here, I'm ready to go to the next phase, which is to just do some light polishing. So as I mentioned before, when you remove the ice cleat sections from the runner, there's going to be a slight little burr remaining. Even if you use a clean cut snip, there's still some slight burring left. And in order to take care of that, what I like to do is I like to just simply roll up the track into a snail. And then once it's all spooled up with some light sandpaper, I can just go over the sections right here. Make sure that the tracks are nice and flat on the surface, and then you just very lightly go over it in this manner. Obviously, you want to have the very fine sandpaper for this, and you don't want to be overly aggressive, just a couple passes like I'm doing right here, and that should be enough to blunt the edges. Do the same to both sides. And once you're done, the sides here will be nice and refined. Something else that you can potentially do is lightly go up and down the center between the teeth. Some of the teeth have a slight injection pin on them, and the injection pin by and large is actually pretty flatly molded, so it's not an issue. However, I believe on one of them there may be just a slight little bit of flash. Nothing much to be concerned about, but it's just something that if it does bug you, like I think this is the guy right over here, again, just take the sandpaper and just go over this section like you see here. Don't want to put too much tugging on it, just a nice little pass like that, and that should be more than enough for flattening out whatever flash is remaining. For good measure, I'll just do this to the secondary track as well. And there we have it. So at this point here, the tracks are now ready for paint. Before I actually go into paint, I just want to say that the links do supply, or I should say the set does supply you with an ample amount of spares in case you have a couple accidents, which I actually did during the duration of the build. Here you can see the links that didn't quite make it. Some of these were the ones that need to have been deburred, and I kind of stumbled into them, and while I was trying to figure out a way to deburr them, I broke some of the hinge sections, so these guys here were not going to be able to be utilized. However, the kit does give you ample amount of spares, so you can see I got the both track bands assembled, and I have basically 2 runners left. This one here is literally left completely intact. This one here I just have a number left. For the cleat sections, I have 1 complete runner. Yeah, essentially I have basically 1 complete runner left too of those. Now, in full disclosure, you actually have a mix of some of the new the links that came with this kit, and also had several spare on hand from the previous Löwe kit that I built from Amusing Hobby, and there's no point having those languish away in the spare bin, so I went ahead and incorporated them on this build too. Those are standing out from the other one with the different shade of plastic. These ones here are slightly redder in color. Those are from the older one. However, having said that, you can see basically, even if I didn't use these links over here, I still had ample amount of leftover tracks here to do the job, even with the ones that didn't quite make it. So if this happens to you, you do have quite a number of spares on hand. But if you watch this video, hopefully you should be able to navigate the waters properly with deburring some of those sections, and the track will go together very effortlessly. And here we have the tracks fully painted and weathered and are actually ready for installation. For the paintwork on these, I went with Rattle Can El Cheapo Flat Black Spray Paint. Generally, in these videos, I say when it comes for single-piece vinyl tracks, you do not want to use spray paints at all because they have a habit on potentially damaging the rubber, causing a negative chemical reaction, which will potentially destroy the material. For workable track links, this opens up some of the paints that you could paint them with, i.e. now you could go ahead and roll with some spray paints. However, you want to be careful because some of the more premium brands like Rust-Oleum or even some of the Krylon stuff may be even too harsh for some polystyrenes. They can actually melt and fuse some of the links together, which is also something that's not exactly beneficial. In the past, I would always roll with the just cheap economy spray paints because they seem to be the most forgiving and they worked well without causing any sort of collateral damage on the tracks themselves. For this one over here, this is no different, and that's why I rolled with this economy can of spray paint from Lowe's. Although this one appears to be, at the time of filming this, their newer formula, and the formula on this is very similar to the more premium brands that I was hazarding against, so I was kind of lukewarm on attempting to paint some of these parts with the harsher paints. However, for this one here, I experimented on the ice cleats here, and they worked out just fine. So I went ahead and tried it out, and lo and behold, the paint worked flawlessly. However, the caveat is that you want to apply in very, very thin layers, but that goes without saying for all spray paints. For this one here, a little will do you. And you could easily, the reason why I'm saying this is because when you're spray painting again to this groove, when you're going to want to just thoroughly coat the part, go up and down a few times, and you're going to have to pump the brakes because that is definitely not something that's going to help you in this case. But, as you can see, the tracks came out absolutely perfectly with their base coat, and the weathering was done with the dry brush as I usually reference in these videos. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and now install it onto the tank. And before I do, there's something about the tank I do want to mention. And the thing I want to mention involves the rear idler wheel. So with the way the kit is designed, the idler mount has this swing arm on it, and this gets glued to the hull right over here, and this can only go on in one way. There's this little half moon section that's molded into the hull, and a corresponding half moon right over here on the swing arm, and this ensures that you glue the piece on and it stays at a certain point. The issue that I found with the other version of the Löwe is that if you follow this method, when you put the tracks on, it's either too loose or it's too tight. So on this one over here, what I went ahead and did was I deleted the molded in half moon shelf with a Dremel. Now with that removed, the piece can fully swing up and down, or left or right, I should say. The reason why this is relevant is because when it comes time for putting on the tracks, I can now adjust the tension just like you would on the real one, and once the tension is set to a certain point, I can then add the adhesives, solidifying it in place, and then the track tension is now set at the appropriate length. This was done, by the way, to both sides. From here, I'm going to go ahead and grab the sprockets and start the timing, and then you'll see me do the actual installation onto the tank itself. Just like with all tank tracks, orientation is key, and for the Löwe over here, you want to make sure that the teeth are in the right direction, and the way you see it on the table, it's actually wrong. If you look at the instructions, you'll see that the teeth are actually closer towards the outer portion of the tank compared to the inner, so we're going to go ahead and make sure that that is correct on the example right here. So the next thing to figure out is exactly where do the two, or I should say the master link, will connect. And if I have the tracks stretch on the table here, that's going to be somewhere on the top, and that's definitely not where you want it. On this type of track here, because of the way it gets installed with that ice cleat section has to get glued on, you want to have access to it, and the best way I found is either anywhere along the bottom span of the vehicle. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and put the model on its side, and I'm going to go ahead and time the sprocket. What that means is that the sprocket teeth are going to engage into the slots over here found on the track itself. Also on the Löwe, it's a little complicated because we have lots of little cutouts here on the track, and the one that you want to pay attention to is the one all the way on the end. This is where this tooth here is going to intersect. So if I flip the track over, it's going to be like this. So just like so. The reason why I have to mention this is because you could potentially install it on the wrong way. So now that has been figured out, I'm going to go ahead and time the track. I'm just going to temporarily place it on the wheels over here so I see exactly where the end link is going to be, which is right here. Perfect. And now I could see exactly where the sprocket section needs to time. Line up the holes on the sprocket, wrap the sprocket around the track. Then at this point here, I could go ahead and install it onto the vehicle. And as usual, which is the case, it's far easier done when you're not filming. But let's see if I could go ahead and make do. Once you have the track at the appropriate location, you're lining up the sprocket onto the main axle. But before I do, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that the teeth line up into the appropriate wheels. And once that is all done, I could go ahead and then just slip the unit in place. The sprockets have poly caps like a Tamiya, so they should just plug on in place once they find their magical sweet spot. With the help of a needle file over here, I'm just pressing lightly against the track so that it seats properly. On the wheels here, one space of the wheel slides into one of the teeth and the other will slide into the other. At this point here, I could go ahead and line up the idler wheel. Now at this point, no glue has been added to the part. And I'm just going to shuffle the piece on in. Once it's shuffled in, this is the look that you want to see. At that point there, I'm ready to go ahead, flop the track over, and do the joining section. Pro tip, you could put the instructions or some sort of a soft object on the table just so that the model does not make contact with the table and could potentially scratch or damage it. At this point here, you have to go ahead and get the tracks to go where they need to go. The problem is you're kind of fighting the tension, but once everything is lined up appropriately, it should just stick in place like that there. from this point here, I'm going to go ahead, clip off the ice cleat, glue it on, much along the lines I did during the actual construction before. Some people are probably going to wonder, but John, is it possible to assemble the track in a loop and then install that way? The answer is theoretically yes, but I always found it's really hard to actually get the parts to, or I should say the track to slide in with all the suspension. It is doable, but me personally, it's just not a technique that I prefer. I like doing it this way. I've always had some excellent results this way, so that's why I continue to do it. However, the other way is an option, and it's just one that I might as well just go ahead and mention. Just like before, you just want a finite amount of glue. Just like that. You want to make sure that the pegs are in the right location. And you just drop it in place. The piece should just be able to find its magic sweet spot. And once it does, it'll lock in where it needs to go. And at that point there, just set it aside and let the glues do their job. In the interim, I'm going to go ahead and get the other track installed on the opposite side. No point getting that on camera. After the CA sets, and with the tracks installed on both sides now, I'm going to go ahead and now set the tension. So to do this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that the track is at its most saggy point here, and right now the idler is at its loosest point. So this is where it actually has some artistic licensing, because some people out there, they like to have their tracks really sloppy and very loose on these King Tigers and Tiger 1s and Panthers, so I'll throw that in there, and other people like to have them a little bit more tight. And on these German tanks, it's one of these misconceptions where the looser the track, or the typical way we always tend to see them, where the track runs flat on the track here, then it goes up on the front, is the correct way. However, that's not necessarily the case. If anyone's ever built any RC1, specifically if worked on the Armor Techs or even any of the smaller scale 1/16s, you'll know that if the track is too loose like that, you tend to throw very often. So on these German tanks, they tend to run best when the track has a nice arch to it. And that's how I like to incorporate them on my builds. Of course, this is subject to artistic licensing, of course. Do whatever makes you happy, but in my opinion, and from what I've seen on the way these things actually run, also if you watch some of the wartime footages when these things are driving, you tend to see the tracks in the arching manner that I mentioned before. So at this point here, I'm actually going to go ahead and set that. So I'm just going to go ahead again, make sure that the timing is all there on the sprocket, and that the teeth are indexing properly on the row wheels. And at this point here, I'm going to set the tension. So this is actually at its loosest point, and I'm going to carefully position it, and I'm going to torque it with a plier over here so that it has just a little bit of extra tension. So hopefully I get this on camera. It's a little tricky as it usually is, but boop, that's it. Let's see what that looks like now. Let's make sure the wheels are all lined up. And before everyone's wondering, yes, I do have the hubcaps. They're in the box. They're going to be installed after the track gets fitted securely, or once the track fitting is completed, I should say. Okay, that is actually kind of where it needs to be. However, just for the sake of aesthetics, I'm going to loosen it slightly, just so it has a little bit more of a touching of some of the row wheels. And because these are workable, they love to move around on you. But there we go. I think that's set the appropriate tension now. So at this point here, I'm going to flip the model back over, and I'm going to add a little finite amount of glue onto the rear idler shaft, just so it holds its place. Otherwise, it has a potential of getting knocked loose and losing tension. Admittedly, you don't have to do this. Say if you want to you're just not happy with how the tension is and you want to constantly fiddle with it, then you obviously don't glue it and you can just leave it in. The friction fit does hold it in pretty well right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and lock it just because it makes me feel better just to do that. To secure it in place, I'm going to use some thin super glue over here. However, I'm not going to use the applicator on the tip. In fact, I'm going to use what I like to call the ninja poison technique. As for what that is, well, if anyone's ever seen one of those old James Bond movies or some kind of assassin movie, a lot of times whenever they try to poison someone in their sleep, they take the bottle of poison and they have a little drop of poison run down the wire or the string into the person's lips, and the dirty deed is now done. And the reason why I'm going and saying all this is because, well, that is actually the exact same way I'm going to apply the glue. With a small little drop of glue on the end of the wire here, I just go in and touch the location, and the glue is just going to flow into the location exactly where I want it, no more, no less. The reason why I'm utilizing this technique is because it has far more precision compared to the applicator, which even this one here is a bit gnarly because it's been used, and these applicators just don't last long in real life with usage. But even when new, you have the potential causing an accident where you could have the stuff just run out on you, and that's the last thing you want to have happen to you when the build is essentially completed. So in order to prevent that, I'm going to utilize the poison technique. Also, with the glue I'm using is very, very thin super glue. The Amazon link is also found in the video description. This stuff is practically like water, so it will flow exactly where I want it into the confines that I want it in. With the tension double checked to exactly where I want it, now it's time to add the glue. Let me flip the model back over. Hopefully I can get that guy in frame. Open the bottle of glue and begin with the ninja poison technique. Just looks like I got a little clump of glue on here. Just chip that off. Okay, now that the wire is cleaned off, let me go ahead and add the glue where it needs to go. Here's a drop of glue on there. And boop, there we go, done. That's it. The stuff just seeped exactly where it needs to go, and this stuff dries practically on contact, so needless to say, that track is all set. Do the same thing to the one on the opposite side now. Okay, that's all there is to that. Also, on this one here, it looks like the wire made contact with the swing arm prior to installation. Not a problem. It's going to leave a little bit of a sheen over there, which is not necessarily a problem because these things are lubed on the real one, so there would be some grease seepage or oil seepage in that location. But if it is something that bothers you, I have some flat matte varnish. I can just brush it on that section over there, and then once it dries, it'll blend in absolutely transparent with the remainder of the model's finish. But that's really all there is to that. And so now we have our suspension that's done. First thing I do though before I cut to the next take, I'm going to be gluing on those infernal hubcaps, because this is just bugging the hell out of me. So I'll be right back, and let's cut across to when the model is, well, I could put the done stamp on this video. Now that's better. Seriously, it was literally and figuratively killing me without those hubcaps in place. But now that they're in place, the balance has been brought back to the force, and we have the model now fully completed on its tracks. Well, mostly fully completed. Gotta do some small airbrushing of exhaust and stuff, but you get the idea. So, in the end, the Amusing Hobby tracks that come with the Löwe kits are absolutely excellent. They are definitely one of the kit's high points, and it really set the stage on what quality we would expect to see from Amusing Hobby from this point onward. Which, if you came here after watching the model showcase video for this build, you'll know that the two Löwe kits were one of the first releases that Amusing Hobby ever released. But, back to the model, or I should say the review that we have here. The tracks that are supplied with the kit are absolutely excellent. They time with the sprockets perfectly. They have some excellent articulation to them, and on this kit here, it's awesome, just that it's great to have workable track links, but because this kit has the added bonus of a fully working suspension, that just really lends itself as a nice duo to go with the workable tracks. Having workable tracks is awesome, but if you have a working suspension to go with the workable tracks, they pair very well with one another. If you made it to this point in the video, hopefully you walked away with some new techniques or a bit of extra confidence when it comes time for dealing with these tracks that are supplied with these two kits. Either you have these kits in your stash and you're looking on getting into one and you're just curious on what the track situation is, or you're interested in actually picking up these kits and adding them to your collection, and like before, you're Not really sure on what the track situation is like. Well, now that you've seen this video here, hopefully you should have the confidence and the skill sets required, as well as a nice little helping hand to assist you with your build. And with that, that wraps up this workable track link tutorial video for the amusing hobby Löwe workable track link sets. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a fantastic way to keep update on new posted content, being workable track link tutorial and review videos like the one that you just watched, or my usual type of content being small scale model showcase videos and large scale project update videos when they frequently get posted. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of all of the builds that have been seen on this channel in both large and small scale. In addition to that, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Till then.